Hello and welcome to another episode of the Johal Show. And today my guest is a dear friend of mine, Amajit Raju from Derby. And we are going to talk about a disability that isn't talked about very often in our community, as are no disabilities and diseases, etc. We shy away from a lot of subjects that are prevalent, and we do have them. So disabilities and diseases are in the community, and we should be discussing them because that's the only way we're going to learn and how we deal with them and help others. So welcome to the show, Amar.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great. So you hail from Derby?
Yes, born and bred.
Yes. So is your family in Derby?
Yeah, all the family and extended family were all, my grandfather settled there in 63 and we all stayed there. Nobody really moved out.
It's strange because Derby and Wolverhampton, there's a few places where once families move, they don't tend to move out.
That's it, yeah. And you know, where there's strong industrial kind of heritage and roots, you know, the people who came here originally, they worked in those hard jobs. So that the children didn't have to do them.
Yes.
And you know, luckily the children have gone on to do good stuff, and they've stayed where they are. And I salute families who keep their roots.
Yes.
And stay in one place and build their own communities there.
Yeah, wonderful
Yeah,
place.
yeah.
You know, have many fond memories of relatives and friends in Derby.
Ah, wonderful.
And but you know, and then you touched on the fact that you know our forefathers, our grandparents, and sometimes our fathers did the jobs that you know they did so that we didn't have to.
Yeah.
And that's a real story in all of our community, really, isn't it?
It certainly is, and you know they came here for a better life. And I don't know about you, but a lot of people say that when you ask them, you know, what was the original plan, and the original plan was to make enough money and go back, but not many did.
No. I think what happens is, as you said, a foreign country. My grandfather came here in 1951, I believe.
Wow. Okay.
And so we've been here for a long time, and other members of our family have been here since the early 1900s.
Yeah, gosh.
So some of our families like fourth and fifth generation British now. And I suppose when you go to a land of opportunity, which is what Britain was seen as,
Absolutely, yeah.
you do want to go and come back home,
Yeah.
make some money and come back, right?
Yeah.
And then I think what happens is obviously you get acclimatized and you
Yeah.
start liking the place and start setting down roots.
That's right.
Because, you know, and then as those roots come down and wives started coming, and then obviously children, and it's our home now, isn't it?
Absolutely, and I'm glad they did stay, because obviously I'm here. Life would have been slightly different back in the Punjab.
Very much so, very, very much so. So tell me about the disability that you suffer from, and explain to our viewers what actually it is.
Okay, I have a disability called cerebral palsy. Cerebral palsy has many forms. And the version that I have is called diplegia, where the right side of my body is weaker and sometimes stiffens up, and it affects the way I walk.
Yes.
Particularly as I'm getting older now, the aches and pains are a lot more.
Does it get worse?
It doesn't get worse. The condition stays at the same level, but your other your legs and arms are having to work harder, so you end up getting arthritis early, or you just feel a little bit more tired than people of my age. Although, to be honest with you, I've seen some of my friends my age; they're quite tired already. So yeah, but yeah, that's how it affects you. But cerebral palsy has many forms. Many people have heard of quadriplegia. There's hemiplegia. And cerebral palsy is like having a stroke at birth or shortly after birth.
Okay.
And it's basically a blocked or burst of the blood vessel, which then causes the child some kind of distress.
Okay.
And then that's how the condition manifests.
Okay, so it's not something that's inherited?
No, it happens to anyone.
Yeah, so it happens after birth?
Slightly before, during, or after birth.
Okay.
It's during that process. It can happen to anybody. So so yeah, in my family, I think I was the first disabled child that you know, when I look back beyond in the wider Raju family, there wasn't anybody.
No.
And even going back into the Punjab and my family there wasn't anyone there. So it just happens. It happens a lot.
So we don't know any reasons. It's just. What are the chances? How many out of a million?
In my case, I'm fortunate enough to have checked my medical records, and there was a deprivation of oxygen.
Okay.
And that's what causes. I think I was breech baby when the baby's upside down, and that causes distress to the baby, and I think that's what caused me. We never know.
Okay.
You know, in those days, I'm going back to the late 60s when I was born.
Yes.
And the level of detail in my records is nowhere near it would be today.
Of course.
So, you know, and even then, you know, my parents weren't told it was cerebral palsy. They would, and bear in mind, they'd only just come to the country, and then I was born, and as far as they were concerned, you know, this baby's not walking yet. This baby's not crawling the way others are.
So how many siblings do you have?
I have two siblings. Yeah.
Older or younger?
Younger. I'm the oldest.
Okay, so you came first.
I came first.
So your parents were relatively young, married young,
yeah,
had children young. It's very typical of our community.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so it was new to them, and you know, the diagnosis. And this is really strange because I talk to a lot of disabled people from the Asian community particularly, whose parents say something similar, that they weren't given the detail in the diagnosis. It was just your child is either weak or slow or whatever, and no one's really had a. And you're going to find this strange. I didn't realise it was cerebral palsy till I was about 22, 23.
Wow.
I went through my whole life not knowing.
Just let's take you back to those early days. So do you think that obviously medicine's advanced, and it's advancing every day, and the pace is picking up, thank goodness.
Yeah.
But how much do you think was it because medicine wasn't where it is today, and how much do you think it was because our parents obviously were immigrants, they didn't always understand the language well, and how much of it is that they didn't have this inquisitive mind wanting to find out exactly what it was?
Well, I think, you know, in my case particularly, they did everything they could. I think it was about 2 to 3 years old before I started walking.
Right.
But that was down to them really pushing me and not giving up on me and say, come on. Well, apparently I used to hold on to the walls as a little baby and try my best to walk. So yeah, they did everything they could, but I mean, yeah, you're right. Medicines and treatment has advanced now. Now, a child born today with cerebral palsy, they're given all sorts of, obviously physiotherapy is really important. The quicker you get physiotherapy, and apparently it makes make the child's life easier in terms of adapting. But now they're looking at Botox injections now, botulinum injections, which you would connect with you know, plastic surgery and beauty therapy treatments, etc. But that's the treatment they're offering now children. In my day as a child, it was cut a muscle here and a nerve ending there, etc., which was quite painful.
Of course.
I had 3 surgeries as a child, which if you ask me did they work, I say no, they probably made me worse.
Really? How old were you when you had the first one?
I can just about remember the first one. It was, I would say, I must have been 5 years old, 4 or 5 years old, and we've all heard of the Achilles tendon on the ankle. They cut it. I used to walk on my toes a lot.
Yeah.
So they wanted to get the heel on the floor, and to do that, they lengthened the Achilles tendon by snipping it into a zigzag position, so it lengthened.
Okay.
And I must admit that did work, but it left the foot weaker. Anybody who's had foot surgery will know you're never the same. Now, I've had that particular surgery twice.
Okay.
I had as an adult as well at the age of 26, and I was inquisitive enough to want to stay awake for that one. So I had the epidural and actually watched the surgery. And that was strange. That was a strange experience. But I understood what they were doing.
Right.
But yeah, again, the foot was never the same.
Okay.
At the age of 8, I had surgery just under my knees to stretch the hamstrings.
Okay.
And again, I was never the same. In fact, that was the defining moment for me when I realised I'm disabled.
Right.
That was the point where I thought, something's not right. Because before that, I was just like any other kid. I wanted to play. I had energy. I could run around and do stuff. I might run around differently, but I was doing it all.
Okay.
And but that's the moment when I realised I can't do certain things anymore now, because it had a bit of an effect on me.
So how old were you then?
I was about 8, 9.
And how did that affect you?
I became very conscious about the world around me. Before that, I was an innocent child, just
didn't care.
Didn't care, just doing things. Got in trouble like everybody else, and I was full of energy. But after that surgery, I know that was the moment where I started clicking that I'm different.
Something's not
I'm
the same as everybody else.
Yeah.
And did you feel? You said you used the word different.
Yeah.
So you didn't feel that in some way there was something wrong with you, but that you were just different to other kids?
I felt I was, you're spot on. I didn't think anything was wrong with me. I just thought I'm different, but as with any child, and children are, touch wood, better than this than adults. They adapt quickly to whatever changes happen to them, and they find different ways. And the human body is great like that, because if you can't do it one way, the human body finds another way of doing it.
Yes, it does, doesn't it?
And that's exactly what happened with me. I just walked differently, and I ran differently as a child, but I did run and I did walk. I can remember as a child I could walk at a fast pace for distances, long distances, no problem.
Okay.
Wouldn't be able to do that today.
No. So I presume that you went to a normal school, as in not a school for any disabilities.
No, went to mainstream education,
Yeah.
as a infant school, junior school as we called it, and comprehensive secondary school. Went to school in mainstream. Yeah.
Do you think, looking back at that now, I mean, obviously children are separated quite a lot these days. I don't know what the current thinking is, whether they should go to a normal school as possible or not. Where are you with that? Would you rather have gone to a special school, or were you happier in the mainstreams?
Good God, no. I am pleased that my parents fought for that right for me to stay in mainstream.
Okay, so did the authorities want to?
I looked at my records.
Yeah. Okay.
The great thing about data today, we have access to our own data, and I looked at it, and there were labels being put on my files.
Okay.
That this child is slower, this child is unlikely to achieve. These kind of things were being written at me at that time, and it breaks your heart today.
It's really interesting, isn't it, when we don't achieve what we thought we were going to achieve, but you don't know the authorities.
And the thing is, if you look at my school reports, they were really good. I was achieving. I was clever.
So you're not behind anybody in terms of any major differences. You're like a normal, for your age.
I excelled in every subject. I was a strong reader. I've always my dad, God bless him, has always insisted we read as a child, and that stayed with me to this day.
Yeah, wonderful.
It helped shape me as the person I am. But yeah, so these kind of labels were being attached to me, but I fought, and that's when I realised I'm starting to fight for myself.
Obviously,
in a very kind of subtle way. I wasn't rebelling or anything.
Yeah. So, Amo, you didn't know these labels, these so-called experts who are your teachers, so that academically you're absolutely fine. There's no signs on paper. Nobody would know there was any difference between you and any other child.
Nope.
But so, how did it make you feel seeing these labels many years later?
Yeah, that's upsetting, but not surprising now. Because of the day job that I do, I've seen much worse cases than mine, much worse stories than mine. But yeah, you know, it kind of darkens your childhood memories a little bit. That you're thinking, I was having a fun time, I was okay, and that yet people are having these thoughts about me. That,
yes.
You know, this, and there is this kind of. You know, that's the system, that's education, that's the consultants. I remember going to the GP as a child, and I can't even remember what it was about. I probably had a flu or a cold or something. The days when GPs would look after you for a flu or a cold, but they wouldn't now. But and I can remember just saying, I want to drive a car when I'm older.
Yeah.
But I don't know why. It's this kind of silly thing a child just says out of the blue.
Why not?
And I remember the GP said, maybe not.
Really? How old were you at that point?
I was about 7 or 8.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how did that make you feel?
It didn't click with me.
So you didn't
but
register?
The conversation stuck with me all these years. It didn't click with me what he was trying to say.
Yes.
He'd already written me off.
Wow. Interesting. Interesting. How were your school friends and your siblings with you?
Well, my siblings are lovely. They've you know, they've been great all their life with me. Actually, they've all gone on to do great things themselves. But friends have been fantastic.
No, at that point. When you were at school.
My siblings were young. They wouldn't.
So how are the other school kids? Because clearly you're in a normal school, and you have this disability which slows you down physically.
Yeah. Well, up until the age of 12, because that's when I had my third surgery. You know, again, my friends at that age were brilliant around me. They all knew my limitations, but they would adapt events around me. So I can remember at dinner times I would be playing football with the kids. But they'd put me in a safer position, and I was always in goals.
That's wonderful, though. So you felt that they took care of you.
Absolutely,
That's
and
beautiful.
you know, and back to your earlier kind of thing around mainstream education. That's why it's important, because children are innocent.
Yes.
And they didn't see my disability. They just thought I was differently abled, and whatever I was doing, they found a way of doing it with me.
Yeah.
Or whatever they were doing, they made it inclusive for me.
Yeah.
And that's special, because I wouldn't have got that. Now I know people my age who were put into these special schools, and somebody with a similar level of impairment to mine. I don't know what the story was, whether his parents didn't fight for that right to go into mainstream or not. But he lacked the confidence. He didn't go on to enjoy education. He didn't go on to into employment or any kind of career kind of pathway. And it just shows that if you don't get the right start in life as a disabled child, it kind of does, you're pigeonholed and you stay in that pigeonhole.
It's interesting, isn't it? All the studies talk about how parents and their abilities have an effect on how you turn out.
Yeah.
So, as you said, you know, if your parents don't fight for you when you're an able child, then obviously it's even more important.
Yeah.
When you do have a disability.
Yeah.
And I suppose it very much depends on the parents themselves, their own natures. Some people are assertive, other people are not. So, and then as time's gone on, people today question experts much more than they ever used to.
Yeah.
You know, when you and I were growing up, you would never question a teacher or a doctor, would you?
No, you wouldn't. No.
Yeah.
And this is it. The times have changed. There's a generation of medical experts now, and their training is different. Their thought processes are different. I, in my day job now, have spent many sessions with student doctors.
Yes.
And getting them to understand, look what can be achieved if the system is right.
Yes. Yes.
And you wouldn't get that in those days.
No. So how was the community? So your own family is great, your siblings are supportive, and your parents seem as if they really were very, very supported. How were your family and your relatives?
All fantastic. Again, I don't know whether some secret meeting went on behind the scenes or anything when I was a child, but to this day, they insisted that he will be treated no different.
Okay. Do you think that was your parents that did that?
Possibly.
Yeah.
And, as I say, the wider and extended family had the same kind of view that whatever I remember. I mean, as I say, I've got cerebral palsy. I remember my dad made me paint the whole house when I was about 13. And and I was up ladders and everything, and I thought, look, I'm thinking back now, how the hell did I do that? And he made sure that I was doing the same thing that any other child or teenager would have to do.
But as you said, as a child, you don't know any different.
No, you don't know.
Like you said, you're differently abled, I think is the word.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. No, that's a wonderful phrase.
Yeah.
Not disabled, but differently abled is a wonderful. We should change that language.
There's
definitely.
so many. Well, language is so important because it shapes opinion, and without realizing it, we're educating the wider community, where you incorrectly or correctly by using the right and wrong language. And in the community itself has been not too bad around me. There's been this, our community has this very different understanding of disability.
Understanding or lack of?
Lack of, yeah. You're being
we don't pull any punches on this show. Call it like it is, right?
I mean, say that it's, they didn't expect much of me, and I used to hear conversations behind the scenes. As a child, you pick up things.
You do.
Yeah, you do. When the elders are talking in the room, and especially in our community.
What do you remember? What were they saying?
I just what's going to happen to him? Who's going to marry him? These kind of things.
I was just coming to that.
Yeah, those kind of things were being said around me.
Yeah.
They had a profound effect on me. They didn't realize it because we're supposed to be, as Asian children, seen and not heard. And sometimes it can be insensitive, those conversations, especially when you don't realize that you're actually making someone question their own existence and ability by having these, what you might think are innocent conversations.
Yeah, how old were you then?
I was about 10.
Okay, so you're now, and these are memories, these are kind of your earlier memories, aren't they, of your life?
But that particular memory stuck with me.
Yes, of course it would. Of course it does.
At the age of 10, you're thinking, hang on, I don't want to think about marriage, but hang on, now I'm thinking about marriage. who is going to want to marry me? There's something clearly not right.
It really is interesting, isn't it? Because as a child, you don't feel you have the confidence to say anything to anybody. So, you, as you said, and interestingly, very Victorian saying children should be seen and not heard. Yeah. And I suppose, going back to my own childhood, it's even worse in our communities, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
That, you can't say anything. And then not only are your parents allowed to do or say anything, everybody else is.
Everybody else, all the uncles and aunties and the wider uncles and aunties, they can
all have an opinion, can't
they? Say what they like, and you can't question them.
So now you're 10 years old, and you're worried that you're going to be a bachelor for the rest of your life. Not really.
It wasn't to that extent, but it certainly played on my mind. Thinking,
really?
Okay, you're right. There's a challenge. But I'm too young yet. That doesn't bother me yet. But it was playing on my mind.
That's interesting, isn't it? But the thing is, these negative comments. They say that the average 17, 18-year-old has heard 20,000 times the word no.
Yeah.
And so, and these things affect us.
Absolutely. And in all honesty, I think, again, that was another one of those defining moments, those turning points in my life, where Amo Raju's innocence was lost again. And I had to mature a little bit faster than everybody else around me. And I remember people saying to me, you're quieter than you used to be.
So do you think that's how being made conscious of your disability, is that how it made you feel, that you go a little bit inside and start being a bit more reserved?
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, for me, I don't want to give too much away because a lot of this is in my book, which is out now. But I'm quite happy to share one of the moments that really changed me. As I said earlier, I felt I was an academic achiever. I was doing well in all my subjects.
Yeah. When did you? What age do you remember thinking that?
I was great. When I was in the junior school, they had to make recommendations for the senior school as to which form this person will be, whether they'll be in the top form, medium, or the remedial form. And the junior school teacher, again, having labelled me, had put me in the medium form, even though I knew I was outstanding.
Yeah.
I was top of the marks and everything. And within one term in secondary school, they moved me up. Said, "Hang on, this kid's."
Did they wait till the second year, or did
No,
they move
they just
you up
did
there?
it after one term.
Okay.
After one term, because it's September to December. In January, I was in the higher class.
Yeah.
And so that's where I felt settled. I said, "Right, I'm here in the right place."
That's really interesting, because I came to the UK when I was 10 years old.
Right.
So I did just about my last year in junior school, and of course I couldn't speak English when I first came. And so when I went to secondary school, we had 8 classes in the first year of secondary school, and they put me in the bottom class.
Wow.
And then about 6-7 months later, somebody must have realised maybe he's not so stupid after all, and I think they moved me up 4 or 5 classes.
Yeah.
And that was interesting, because and those were the days when they used to tell you your position in the class.
Yeah.
So we had 31 kids in my class.
Yeah.
So I came 14th in English.
Right.
Everything else was top 5.
Wow.
Okay. So the interesting thing about that is there was a new secondary school that opened, and so my parents decided that I would go there because it's a new school.
Yeah.
So get to the new school, guess which class I'm in the bottom again. And, it's ludicrous, really, like you said. And then your parents are not confident. They're not going to challenge teachers and authority. People generally didn't challenge as much as they do today.
No.
We didn't have the information,
Yeah.
right? So your parents are not going to challenge you. They just think, a boy, well, okay, that's fine. He's in the bottom class. And then I did that. And then at the last day of term in the second year, got called in by my form tutor and said, "You've done really well. We're going to move you to the top class."
Well, it just shows about the pigeonholing again, isn't it?
It was ludicrous.
Yeah,
When I look back, I think, "Oh my God!" Look at how much damage.
Yeah, yeah.
And as you said, and it's only right. Sometimes you think, why are we challenging authority?
Yeah,
it's only right that authority should be challenged.
Yeah.
Because in both yours and my cases, they got it completely wrong, didn't they?
Absolutely wrong. And a lot of kids could probably just give up, say, "Well, okay, maybe I am at this level, and I'll just plod on."
I was going to say that's the other thing, isn't it? So many kids, they must be crushed by these labels that are attached to them.
Yeah.
Right? And so, what did that do to you? Do you think? Did it spur you on? Did you use it, and did it spur you on?
Well, yeah. I remember, as I mentioned earlier, that I had this surgery on my knees. And I remember, because in those days, as I said, it was cutting muscles, etc. And both my legs were plastered up, so I couldn't bend my legs. And they gave me a Zimmer frame as a child.
Okay, how long for?
6 weeks.
Okay, and did you go to school?
No.
Okay, you were
my dad timed it during the 6-week holidays at school.
Okay, so you had the operation.
I had the
summer
operation.
holidays.
So all through the 6-week holidays, I was in plaster but I was still expected to walk with Zimmer frame to keep the muscles going.
Yeah.
And as any child, it hurt, and I was going, "Dad, I can't do this. I can't do this." He goes, "Yes, you can." and I did it, and I kept walking, and that resilience stayed with me in any kind of a situation. And so, as we just said, when it came to education, if someone says you're medium, and I thought, hang on, I know I should be in the top class. I did it for myself that I have to be in that class. It has to be.
Yes.
Otherwise, because the other thing, as you know, with Asian families, you've got to be a doctor. You have to be a doctor, an accountant, or whatever, engineer, or whatever. It's
no,
one
you
of
have
those
to be
jobs.
a doctor, and if you fail at that, you could be an accountant,
You could be,
or a pharmacist,
Oh,
or anything like that.
And these kind of things were all in my head that I've got to do something.
Okay.
Again, because people kept saying, you know, he's not going to be able to do the jobs in the factories and stuff, so he's got to have a seated job. So he, you know, what's a seated job? You be a GP, right? Everybody's medicine's out. That's
Okay.
So that was in my mind.
Okay, so you're going to be a doctor.
So I
At what age were you when you thought, I'm going to be a doctor?
Oh, I was about 10, 11 years old. I've got to be a doctor. That's the only thing that's going to work for me.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so I had to fight for that. But as I say, the turning point for me then became when, and this was one of the darkest moments for me, because I started getting bullied for my disability.
Okay, so let me just take us back. So when you were young, 6, 7, 8, your friends protected you.
Yeah.
And then you become a teenager, go to secondary school.
Yeah.
Now the bully. It's really interesting, isn't it? How as children, when we're relatively young, bullying is quite rare.
Well, yeah.
In the early stages, but as teenagers, something happens, doesn't it?
Something happens to children where they get insecure in their own kind of existence, so they kind of, you know, push it onto someone else.
Yeah,
and that's, I mean, in my case, it was 3 little girls.
Really?
3 little girls. I used to walk to, as I had this surgery, and so I was walking slower, trying, and I had this, and the girls, these 3 little girls came out of nowhere. They were the year below me.
Okay.
I didn't know them, and I found them mimicking my walk.
Okay.
And that was the first time anybody had ever done that to me. I found it strange. I thought something was, you know, that maybe they've got cerebral palsy.
Yeah.
And then they were laughing at me as well.
Okay.
And I thought, okay, it's happened once, you know, but it continued.
The same girls?
The same girls.
Okay,
it continued for 4 years.
Wow.
And that's when my education went down the pan.
Did you report it?
I mentioned it to the teacher at the time, and he said, in so many words, you're going to get this through your life, mate. Might as well get used to it. And
conditioning you, aren't they,
and
to expect it?
I didn't want to tell my parents, so I didn't, because it would upset them. I didn't tell anybody. I kept it inside me, internalized it.
Were you one of those guys or kids that had 2 separate lives, one at home and one at school?
Pretty much. Pretty
Yeah?
much. I found reasons not to go to school.
Okay.
I'd have more colds and flus than anybody, you know. And my parents didn't clock on that this kid's trying it on, but I didn't want to go. I still did go, but when I did go, I didn't enjoy it.
Yeah, so
I
the
tried
grades
it.
suffered.
Yeah, I tried enjoying it. I used to find different routes to classes just to avoid these girls, because it would have an effect on me. And that really, really, really changed my outlook on life. That's when I realised I am disabled, and now I cannot be like these other kids around me. Something is going to be different with me. And it was only when I left school that I went the exact opposite and became loud and proud, and because they weren't with me.
Yeah, I was going to say, they're not holding you down.
They're not there anymore, and my environment was different.
Okay, so academically started suffering? Because you didn't go to school, was very negative?
I just about scraped through on, they were O-levels in those days.
Yeah.
I just about scraped through on those.
Okay.
Yeah, and didn't get enough, because my parents wanted me to go on to do A-levels, like every parent does.
Yeah.
But I didn't, the grades weren't high enough, so I couldn't do them.
So did you leave school at 16?
I left school at 16, went on to do a year at college, got a couple of extra A-levels, O-levels should I say. But that's when the world changed. That's when you're in a semi-adult world.
Yeah, how did it change for you?
It changed for me because the environment, it's less restricted in college, isn't it?
Yes.
The teachers don't really care whether you're doing or not.
Well, it's up to you. You're seen as an adult, and it's up to you. You're at college because you want to be there.
Yeah, and so I learned about the dreaded relationship with alcohol that many have had. I became very loud.
Yeah.
You know, if I walked into the room, people knew Amma was there.
Were you compensating?
I think so. Looking back,
yeah,
I think so. I grew wild hairstyles.
Yeah.
I had no. This may come as a shock to you. I had no experience on stage, but I started singing. I was a bhangra singer.
Yes, you were saying.
Yeah. So, and these were all kind of repressed kind of emotions coming out all in one go. That the world needs to see me for something else.
How did the Bhangra singing go? Did you have a group or you were solo?
I hopped along from band to band.
Okay.
In the 80s, live bands were the scene.
Yeah.
And most weekends we were booked doing weddings and stuff. And so I get it today where people's kids come up to me and say, "You sang at my mum and dad's wedding." I think, possibly.
Fantastic. How were you treated then?
It was great.
Yeah, so no different to anybody else?
No different, absolutely no different.
Nobody cared?
Suddenly, my disability wasn't an issue. I was doing things on stage. I could command a crowd of 500, 1,000 people. I was singing, they were dancing, and that felt good.
Brilliant.
A very powerful kind of feeling.
Yeah.
That you were controlling people's enjoyment and happiness.
Okay. So you went to college for a year.
Yeah, and then I did 2 years of what I call the wilderness. Not something I'd be very proud of, and not something I would say to any child nowadays. Don't do this. But I just drank and chased girls, which is wrong.
So that was your wilderness. Was 2 years of.
Yeah, it was just being silly.
But do you think that was just you felt repressed earlier on and just letting go, just partying for 2 years?
Looking back, it was all because my peers they were a bit more reserved. They went to college, had a joke and a laugh, but they got on with their studies.
They actually went to school and studied something as well.
I took it to the extreme, and it's not something I'm very proud of. But looking back at it, and I'm not making excuses for it, but that's the only thing I could think, that I had 4 or 5 years of repression and childhood depression, and it was all coming out. It was just being released in one go.
And the drinking?
That was okay.
How
it was
bad did
was
it
under
get? Was it
control.
just normal?
It was under control.
Okay.
It was silly teenage stuff, which a lot of, as soon as you have that first pint of something, whatever it is, it just kind of takes a hold of you, and that's become your life. And I didn't have a problem or anything. It was just that's what lads did.
Yeah, yeah. So, a couple of years of college. What did you do after that?
Well, after college, I got married.
Was that an arranged marriage?
No, it wasn't an arranged marriage. No.
Okay. Did you when you were seeing girls, did you think back to the days when those uncles were sitting down talking and saying who's going to marry him?
Well, you know what? I think that possibly played a role.
Did it? In what way?
Well, when I say I was chasing girls, it was mainly one girl.
Okay.
Who I'm pleased to say is my wife now.
Excellent.
But it was something maybe inside me, in the back of my head, probably thought, I'll prove you wrong. But I got married, and I had a couple of jobs. The music thing was still going.
Okay.
And I wasn't ambitious. I still didn't think of having a career. My family, parents and grandparents were still saying, get a job. This isn't going to last forever. But at that time, you think it will.
Okay.
And it didn't. And that's when I grew up.
Yes. Were you paid anything significant for your singing?
Yeah. Well, you used to make if you make a couple of £100 on the weekend. I remember in the 80s, you had a good week.
I was going to say, what were salaries like at that time?
There weren't salaries. It was you got what you got. It was kind of. But to be honest with you, and this is a very strange thing to say, I didn't do it for the money. I did it for the buzz.
Sure, of course.
I did it for the attention, for people realizing that this guy's voice is bigger than his disability.
Yeah, I was going to say, the thing is, you suddenly find a voice, you're on stage, like, as you said, there's 500, 1,000 people, and you are in control, aren't you?
Yeah.
You're the boss.
Yeah, and I loved it, and it was great, because I could easily walk down the road and shake my hands dozens of times, because people recognised me for that. And it was nice. It was a nice feeling to be, and to this day, as I say, I haven't sang officially since 2008, but even to this day, people still remember me for that.
Fabulous.
That's a nice feeling.
Yeah. I'd like to move on a little bit now, and you're obviously the age that you are today, and you've lived with this disability literally since birth.
Yeah.
What would you say to the community at our community in particular, how should they be treating youngsters? Not today, because we're going to talk about that another time. But how would you like people to be treated today? What would you like to see changed since the days that you grew up?
I'd like to flip the conversation that was had in my time on its head, and basically say, what can this child do, not what cannot this child. That's
beautiful.
And
Yes.
to look at their abilities, because they, I've seen. I remember must have been 2003, 2004. Some parents had. I was doing a talk at the hospital, and as I was leaving the hospital, I heard a shout behind me, and a young couple, a young Asian couple, just called me, say, "Oh, can we have a word with you?" And I said, "All right, okay." And they had a child who was in a wheelchair, and they said, "We're really, we've been following you," because I used to be in the paper a lot, for whatever reason, and we've been following you, and we really hope our child can have a similar kind of future to you. And I says, look, the only thing I would suggest, if you're looking for advice, the only thing I would suggest is never let this child feel sorry for itself. Never let anybody else have those negative conversations around them. But that doesn't mean protect them in a bubble either.
Yes.
Expose them to the harsh realities of the world, but equally show them that we don't care about those. We're going to achieve everything we can. Move the clock forward. I met that child. I didn't recognise the child.
Yeah.
The child was with his mum shopping about 2 years ago. And his mum called me, and I didn't recognise her, but she recognised me. And she said, this child that we talked about all those years ago, he's studying to be a GP. And I thought, fantastic.
He stole your job.
Well, look, he's probably going to do a better job of it than I would have ever done. But that's important, that the structure around them they can see.
So that's one family, right?
Yeah.
So we still are a community that hides disability. We shy away from it. Our community centre today is the Gurdwara, and a lot of them don't have the most amazing disabled access, etc., do they?
No.
What would you like to see changed?
The disabled person's toilets in many Gurdwaras are still used as a cloakroom. It's an afterthought.
Yes.
My daughter got married in 2017, and I can remember being told that I have to go and sit outside the main hall. The priests at the temple said, you have to sit outside the main hall.
And their reason for that was?
Because I couldn't sit on the floor comfortably.
Yeah, understand that.
And the benches that they reserved for older people and disabled people were outside the main hall. And now you get them inside a hall.
So they put the benches outside?
They put the benches outside.
Incredible.
Well, yeah, and for whatever reason they thought they were doing a great job there. And I kicked off. My daughter was quite upset.
Of course.
I want my dad in the hall with me.
Technically, you're the father of the bride, and you're not witness to your own daughter's wedding.
And at the time, I was a counsellor.
Okay.
I was a politician. I'm pretty sure one priest said to the other, "Do you know who he is?"
Yeah.
And even then, I don't think they agreed. But I didn't care. I went and sat on the stage. I just went and sat on the stage whilst they were doing their kirtan. I was sitting next to them.
But it's a shame, isn't it, that they had the conversation that because you're a counsellor, they may not be able to do that because an ordinary person is okay for them to sit outside.
But most people would have. Most people would have conveniently sat outside, and and it's embarrassing.
So this is at Derby Gurdwara?
This is one of the Derby temples. Yeah, I won't say which one.
No, it doesn't matter. We're not here to. Yeah.
But that's mirrored everywhere. Even
Incredible.
now, you go to most Sikh temples. Disabled people's benches or older people's benches are at the back.
Yes.
Why? Why are they at the back? What would
Where
be
would
the
you put
difference?
them?
I'd put them all the way around.
Okay.
What's wrong with having them all the way around?
I think it's creeping change, isn't it?
I think so.
And I don't know how much you have to do with the management of any Gurdwara.
Not much.
I have, I'm very fortunate. My father is on the committee of Holy Bones Gurdwara in Leicester,
Okay.
As is my father-in-law. And we've known the president since I was a young boy. And I've had a lot to do with the temple.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about it is, if you try and reform anything, there's the immediate backlash of the fundamentalists.
Yeah.
So, even when we get the people that want to make changes and want to be progressive, they pull people back so much.
It is, and that's down to fear. Fear of change, fear of... Our community always has this thing, what will people say? What will the wider community say if we do this? What they see as radical, and it isn't radical, what this radical change is going to be, I just find it... I've got a feeling that, particularly in this country, I've got a feeling that the Gurdwaras in the rest of the world, particularly India, will progress forward, and some elements of our community here will hold that back.
Well, the thing with that is that what actually happens is, the reality of it is that as an immigrant population, you get locked in a time of the 60s and 70s whenever you came, and you kind of think India still represents that, and of course it doesn't. Amo, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
End of a show. We'll have you on a later show to discuss what's happened since then.
Okay.
Been a real eye-opener for me, and I hope it has for our audience. So, disability has to be dealt with. We can't hide it, especially if it's a member of your family, your child, has to be dealt with. The community at large should be helping. Our Gurdwaras, which are our community centres, are really at the forefront of these kind of things. And certainly from what I witness, disability access and facilities for disabled people are seriously lacking. And I would say that, to the point that they're breaking the law in terms of not providing the access that the law stipulates should be supplied to disabled people. It's a real shame because obviously, everybody has a right to worship, all right, and come to the Gurdwara. We believe in Sangat and we believe in praying together, and that includes those members of our community and our families that in some way are differently abled than the rest of us. And there's nothing wrong with that. We're all created by God. And if something happens in genetics or as we're growing up, then so be it. We have to deal with it. We can't just discard and ignore those members of our community. In fact, we have a duty to care for them even more. So if you're watching and you're on the Gurdwara committees or you're part of the community, have a conversation because it may be that those members that are on the Gurdwara committee are just not aware of what's going on, and especially as a disabled individual, how much you're suffering and how much you're being kept from, doing your prayers and worshipping the Guru with the rest of us, which you should be able to. And if you have a disabled child, I hope you've learned something from Amir's experience. You can certainly get in touch with me and I'll put him in touch with yourselves. Contact the station. If there's anything that we can do to help you cope better, access services that are available, both of us and the whole of the staff and members of KTV would be very, very happy to assist you. That's all we have time for tonight. We'll have Amo back on another show to talk about the later part of his life, which we purposely not talked about today, because I felt I really wanted to get this out, because there's nothing to be ashamed of. We have children of all ages, abilities, and they're all special in their own way. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you and good night.